Good morning. My name is Patrick Allen, and I'm an interviewer of veterans for the Veterans History Project at the Library of Congress in Washington, D.C. And the project is conducted here in Southwest Ohio through the Cincinnati Hamilton County Public Library under the direction of Brian Powers. And we have the privilege today of interviewing a veteran, Michael Joseph Vogelpohl, and we're at his home here at 979 Marcia Court in Greendale, Indiana, which is just right near Lawrenceburg in the southeast corner of Indiana. And today's date is January the 23rd, 2026. First of all, let me thank you for agreeing to do this interview, Mike.
You're very welcome.
Do you go by Mike or Michael?
Mike is fine.
Okay.
As the saying goes, I don't care what you call me, just don't call me late for dinner.
I've said that many times myself. And I had a brother, Mike, and I'll tell you about it when we're off camera. Well, let's start out by first give me your full name and when and where you were born.
Michael, middle name Joseph, after my father. Vogelpohl. I was born in Covington, Kentucky on April 7th, 1948.
Were you born in a hospital or home?
It was in a hospital at St. Elizabeth Hospital, which is now, I think, a nursing home or a retirement community, but it's not a hospital anymore.
So did the family live in Covington at the time?
We actually lived out in one of the surrounding communities, out in Taylor Mill, which is south of Covington in northern Kentucky.
What were your mother and father's names?
My father was Joseph Henry Vogelpohl, and my mother was Betty Agnes Knuckleman Vogelpohl.
The spelling on her last name was K-N-O-C-K-E-L-M-A-N?
K-N-O-C-H-E-L-M-A-N.
Okay. Do you remember your dad's birth date?
Dad's birthday was February 18th, 1921.
And how about your mom?
Mom's was October 21st, I believe, 1924.
I've got down here 22, 1022.
1022, yeah, that would be right. Yeah, I'll go with that.
So, do you know how your mom and dad met?
Oh, that's a good story.
Oh, that's why I'm asking you that.
And when my father was drafted into the military for World War II, he ended up going to Macon, Georgia for boot camp and training. And he at that point was an automotive and truck mechanic. So they sent him to boot camp and then to aviation mechanic school. When he got to Macon, Georgia, he met a gentleman by the name of Raymond Knuckleman, who he saw was from the same hometown he was from Covington, Kentucky. So they decided that as best they could, they would bum around together while they were in the service, just to have a connection back home. Well, they both ended up serving at the same air base in Mildenhall, England, and then later were transferred to the air base at Wiesbaden, Germany. When they came home from the war, they were both discharged at Camp Atterbury here in Indiana. On the bus ride from Camp Atterbury back into downtown Cincinnati, my soon-to-be father turns to his buddy Ray and says, "Hey Ray, any idea where we can find some girls?" And Ray says, "Come to my house. I have 10 sisters."
Oh, gee. A wide choice.
And Uncle Ray was one of three brothers. So it was a family of 13.
Wow.
So my dad dutifully went to visit his new friend Ray in Park Hills, Kentucky, which was actually less than a mile from where my dad grew up. So he walks into this house with all these girls, and my mother was of the 13, she was the exact middle of the 13. They took a liking to each other and started dating. Ended up about a year later getting married. While my dad was courting my mother, he brought her around to his family, and my dad's brother Robert, my Uncle Bob, says to my dad, "Boy, she's a looker. Where did you find her?" And he says, "Come with me to her house. She's got 9 sisters." Well, my Uncle Bob very shortly picked out another one of them and married one of my mother's sisters. Therefore, there are 5 people out there right now who are closer to me than first cousins because my dad's brother married my mother's sister. and actually, 2 of those cousins are also Vietnam veterans. So that's how Mom and Dad met.
And are they still living?
Yes, they are.
All right. Well, where'd your dad grow up? What town?
Dad grew up in Covington, Kentucky, West Covington to be exact. And the house is actually still there on Western Avenue.
What did he do before he got into World War II?
After high school, he went to work for then Cincinnati Bell Telephone Company, working in their garage at night, repairing the cars and trucks that the telephone company used to go out and service telephones.
So was he drafted or did he enlist in World War II?
He was drafted.
And he was in the Army Air Force?
Army Air Corps. That's what it was called then.
And you told me he was a mechanic on planes. What kind of planes did he work on?
Dad worked on the B-17s and B-24s at that air base in Meldenhall. He kept them in the air.
And from that base, where else did he serve over in Europe?
From that base, later on, as the war was winding down, he got transferred to the air base at Wiesbaden, Germany, doing the same thing, taking care of the aircraft there.
And before we started the interview, you said that you had the good fortune of going to both of those places where he served.
Yes, and that's a story in itself. And that while I was stationed at Keflavik, Iceland, the Naval Air Station there, my roommate and I took 3 weeks leave and toured Europe. We flew into Meldenhall, England, from our base in Keflavik, Iceland, hopped on a train, went into London for a few days, then another train into Paris for a few days, another train into Zurich, Switzerland. We didn't like Zurich, so we got back on the train that night and went to Rome, toured Rome for 3 or 4 days, then headed north to Frankfurt, Germany, to connect to Wiesbaden, Germany, which was where the R&R plane was to pick us up and take us back to Iceland. Now, when I came home from Iceland, I'm sitting on the front porch swing with my dad, sipping a beer, and I'm telling him all about this trip to Europe. And he gets this big grin on his face, and I finish my story, and he says, "Mike, so you know where I served in World War II?" And he says, "No, Dad, I don't." He says, "I served at that air base at Meldenhall, England, and later in the war was transferred to the air base at Wiesbaden, Germany."
So when you went to those 2 bases, you had absolutely no idea
I had no idea where Dad had served in World War II.
Ironic.
So,
well, okay, you were born in 48. Where did you have brothers and sisters?
yes, I have one brother, and 2 sisters. I am the oldest of the 4 of us.
Give us their names.
Okay, my brother is the second in line, and he is Reverend Monsignor Daniel Joseph Vogelpohl. He's a Roman Catholic priest who has been a priest for over 50 years now, and he lives in northern Kentucky.
And he's 73?
He's 73, yes.
All right.
And my next sister was born 10 years after me, which would make her 67 at this point. Her given name was Mary Jo, all one word, Marijo, Vogelpohl, and she at one point married and became Mary Jo Farrell. And that husband is deceased, and she remarried, but decided to retain her maiden name of Vogelpohl. So she has a different husband now. The youngest of my sisters is Barbara Ann, then Vogelpohl, now Brugge, Bruegge, and she and her husband live in Erlanger, Kentucky.
So where's Mary Jo live?
She lives in Fort Mitchell, Kentucky. And there's a little bit of a story that goes with her name, in that Mom and Dad were having trouble at that point in their life conceiving and going full term. My mother did lose a number of babies to premature birth and miscarriages. Dad had been praying to St. Joseph for a boy. My mother had been praying to the Blessed Virgin Mary for a girl. When the baby was born, they confessed to each other to whom they had been praying and what they were going to do, because they had promised each that they would name the child after them. So they settled on Mary Jo. But then when Dad took the 2 of us boys, and then ages 10 and 7, I believe, to the hospital to pick up Mom and bring home the new baby sister. And this was before car seats, so the 2 of us boys were in the back seat. Mom and Dad and new baby Mary Jo were in the front seat. And my dad turns around and says to us boys, now we have a little miss in the family. Henceforward and forever, her nickname was Missy.
That's a nice tale.
To the point where my grandfather thought that because we called her Missy, her given name was Melissa.
Mm-hmm.
And every birthday card he got from her and Christmas present all said Melissa. He never could quite grasp the thought that that wasn't her name.
Oh,
but
so where's Barbara Ann live?
She lives in Erlanger, Kentucky.
And what's her husband's name?
Her husband's name is Jim Brugge.
Jim Brugge. Does Mary Jo work outside the home, or?
At this point, she's semi-retired. She volunteers at the Northern Kentucky Catholic Children's Home in Fort Mitchell, Kentucky, which is about a half a mile from her house, which is actually where my youngest sister, Barbara, works full-time.
Okay. I was going to ask you about that, yeah. Okay. So, where'd you go to grade school?
I went to St. Anthony Elementary School. It was first grade through 8th grade, which is in Forest Hills on Grand Avenue in northern Kentucky, which was the school affiliated with the parish where we attended church on Sundays, St. Anthony's Church. And
so did you go to 8 years?
8 years
school?
there.
And then where did you go?
I had one very interesting experience there, and that one of those 9 sisters of my mother became a Benedictine nun and actually had me in her 3rd grade class. at St. Anthony, and little Michael thought that, oh, good, I've got Aunt Sister Mara as my teacher. I can get away with doing whatever I want or don't want to do. Well, they picked up on that real quick and changed my mind for me. It's one of the issues there was every Sunday when you went to church, all the nuns were there to talk to the parents of the children. And if little Mikey needed attention, Sister Mara would tell Mom and Dad, and when we got home from church, Mom and Dad would bring down the wrath of God on me.
A little discipline session.
Yes, very much so.
Where'd you go from St. Anthony? What high school?
From St. Anthony, I went to my father's alma mater, Holy Cross High School in Latonia, Kentucky. Went there all 4 years of high school.
Did you play sports or anything there?
I didn't play sports because I wasn't quite that athletic, but I was the president of the pep club.
Okay.
For a few years. And very much into going to all the basketball games. We had no football team then. We had basketball, golf, and baseball, and volleyball for the girls. This was a very small school. I think there were like 78 in my graduating class. But that's the same school that my dad graduated from in 1937.
So what was your dad doing while you were in high school? What was his job?
At that point, Dad had worked his way up from first being the floor sweeper in the garage for the telephone company, to working on cars and trucks, to being head of the maintenance crew at the Russell Street Covington garage for the phone company. He was so good at it that they put 3 garages under his control, and then eventually all of the garages in northern Kentucky. And after he had successfully ran them for a number of years, they promoted him to head of motor vehicle of all of Greater Cincinnati and the Cincinnati Bell Telephone Company's garages, all with just a high school diploma. So at the point that I was in high school, Dad was now working out of an office in downtown Cincinnati. So he was my ride to school in the morning, because there was no bus service for the Catholic high schools back then.
Yeah.
And I had to find my own way home.
And what'd you do for that?
Well, I was supplied with 35 cents a day, which was what it cost to ride the Newsom bus line from down in Latonia out to Taylor Mill, and then I had to walk about a quarter of a mile from the main highway to the house. If I could find my own way home, I got to keep the 35 cents. Now, I found out real quick that a young man going to a Catholic school where they at that time required us to wear shirt and tie, dress slacks, dress shoes, be very well presented. And when you've got a load of books under your arm and you're standing on the side of the street with a shirt and tie and hitchhiking,
you get a lot of rides.
You got a lot of rides. So more often than not, I put that 35 cents in my pocket. There were a number of rides that I caught that I probably shouldn't have taken them up on. One was, I think the driver was rather inebriated. So after about a quarter of a mile, I just told him, this is where I live. I have to get out here. Let him get out of sight. And then another time, a young man, I think he was from the public high school in Covington, who had his own car. That was the fastest ride home I ever had in my life. And I really shouldn't have taken him up on that either.
You didn't know it at the time you
No,
got in.
didn't know it when I got in, but I sure found out real quick. But by that time we were home, and that was 8 or 9 miles away.
Did you have any jobs on the weekends or summertime when you were in high school?
When I was in high school, I actually started work at the end of my freshman year, working in a convenience store for $1.15 an hour, stocking shelves and sweeping floors. Eventually, they decided they didn't need me, and I was able to then take my, I think it was about 5 or 6 months worth of experience, and go to the local IGA store, which was about 5 miles up the road, and get on there for $1.30 an hour. And I ended up working there part-time. I think it was 2 evenings a week and all day Saturday until high school graduation.
So what'd you do with the money that you earned?
All of that money went into my bank account to pay for my college education.
Okay. So when did you get out of Holy Cross?
I graduated in May of 1966, and at that point, Vietnam was getting cranked up, and I very quickly realized that if I didn't find my way into a good college somewhere, I was going to end up being drafted. So I had taken entrance exams at a number of colleges and got accepted to what was then Villa Madonna College, which is now Thomas More University.
And where was Villa Madonna?
Villa Madonna at that point in 1966 was a conglomeration of very unusual and different buildings in downtown Covington. Some of the buildings were old tenement houses that the living room was converted to a classroom, and the bedroom was now the teacher's office. Another one of the buildings was an old firehouse that had been converted into a biology lab. Another of the buildings shared, half of the building was classrooms, and the other half of the building was actually a funeral parlor. And then one of the local Catholic elementary schools was also in the area, and after the elementary school students would go home in the afternoon, the college students would go in and use the classrooms. The student union library and classrooms was the former Knights of Columbus building on 11th Street down in Covington. So it was a conglomeration of many buildings. And in 1968, Thomas More, then Thomas More College, built its new campus out on Turkeyfoot Road in Edgewood. And most of everything moved out there. Some of the things stayed in Covington, like the biology lab, until they had fully established the new biology labs out in Edgewood.
What were you studying at Villa Madonna and Thomas More?
I was just doing a basic business administration, business management program. I had managed to get the draft board to classify me as 2S, a student in college, because technically Villa Madonna College was at that point in time a teacher's college, and I think the draft board thought I was studying to be a teacher.
Okay.
But that's just my opinion on that.
So you survived college long enough to graduate?
I managed to graduate in May of 1970, knowing full well that upon graduation, the college had to inform the draft board that I was now eligible for induction, but basically I was eligible for immediate induction. Knowing that, I took it upon myself to go out and try and get into anything other than the Marines or the Army.
Why is that?
I didn't want to be a ground pounder in Vietnam. That's a dangerous occupation.
Okay.
And Marines are crazy. Those guys do strange things that end up getting them killed. No, I don't want to be one of those.
So what did you choose?
Well, I managed to find 2 openings at the Naval Reserve Center on Gilbert Avenue in Cincinnati. There were 2 openings for the month of June. And they had a test they wanted you to take, because they had so many people applying to get into Naval Reserve that you had to take an entrance test. The test was scheduled for a Saturday, which was the Saturday morning after our college graduation party, which meant I was in not in too good a shape to be taking a test. I went in, I took it. It was a 4-part test. I took the first part, and I didn't realize it at the time, but I do now, that the test was designed for a 7th grader to pass. And here I am, a college graduate, and I've whizzed through the first part. I was done in like 15 minutes, and they had 45 minutes scheduled for it. I handed my test in. The proctor checked it, looked at me, checked it again. I had scored a perfect score on it. And we did the second thing, and again I just whizzed through it, and he checked it, and again a perfect score. On the third part, same thing, but I missed 1 question, so I didn't get a perfect score on the third part. But the 4th part I made up for it. I got a perfect score again. So I got 1 of the 2 openings. And I was actually sworn into the Naval Reserve on July 1st, 1970.
Where were you sworn in?
At the Naval Reserve Center in Gilbert Avenue in Cincinnati. The program that I got into, they called a 2x6 program. It was a total 6-year enlistment, but only 2 years of active duty. So I thought,
before we follow up on that, while you were in college, did you work?
Only a few summer jobs. One summer I delivered furniture and appliances. One summer I ran car parts for an auto parts store out of Covington. Another summer I was actually a collections agent for then Bank Americard, I think now it's called Visa, sitting in an office calling people who were delinquent on their payments, which meant I learned a few new words. But, I just had various, whatever jobs I could, and I was able to, with all of my high school part-time work and all of my college part-time work, to fully pay for 3.5 years of my college education.
Super.
I took a loan from mom and dad to pay for the last semester. And by the time I was out of college and had been working for, I think, 4 months, I had paid them back.
So you get sworn in Cincinnati, July 1.
Mm-hmm.
Then where did you have to report?
I reported right to that reserve center, because I actually ended up spending 16 months in the reserve center drilling once a week for those 16 months before I went on active duty. So I was able to make rank. I went on active duty as an E4 third-class petty officer, which was great because I missed out on all of the grunt duties that the new recruits had to go through.
So after 16 months in the reserves, you're a third-class petty officer, and where do you have to start serving then?
Okay, at that point, they called me into the office. I was at the Naval Station in Philadelphia. Called me into the office to tell me where I was going, and it said, "You're going to be transferred from here to Naval Air Station Keflavik." And I said, "Okay, where's Keflavik?" And they said, "We don't know, but report to McGuire Air Force Base on this time, on this day, and there will be an airplane there for you to take to get to Keflavik." I said, "Okay." Really don't know where Keflavik is, but so I'm got my orders in my hands. I walk out of that office, and I'm walking down the street to go back to my barracks. And I don't know about this, Lord. Lo and behold, the next building down the street was the base chapel. So I stopped in, and I said, "Okay, you're sending me to this Naval Air Station at Keflavik. I don't know what's there. I don't know where it is. You've got something in mind for me, so let's go." So about 4 days later, I'm climbing on an airplane that took me from McGuire Air Force Base to St. John's, Newfoundland, where we stopped to refuel, and then on to the Naval Air Station at Keflavik, Iceland.
Well, were you outfitted clothing-wise for Iceland?
Not until we got there. One of the issues with that particular flight was that when we got on that airplane at McGuire Air Force Base, it was so foggy and cloudy that you could not see the tips of the wings if you looked out the window of the airplane.
Ooh.
And it stayed foggy and cloudy the entire trip to Keflavik.
How long was the trip from McGuire?
It was about, let's say the first leg was about 4 hours, and the second leg was about 5 hours. And when we landed at the Naval Air Station, Keflavik, they told us, "Stay in your seats on the plane," until one of the ground crew got on the plane and told us, says, "Here's what you're going to do. When we go down the stairs to get off the plane, make sure you keep the person in front of you in sight and follow them." It was that foggy. You couldn't see more than 10 feet.
Wow.
And he said, "We know the markings on the ground. We will lead you in to the building." Okay. So, every once in a while the line would stop because somebody lost their way, and then they'd have to come back out and get us. They finally got us all into the building. Then they said, "Before you leave this building, we need to brief you on what to expect in Iceland. This one, it doesn't get real cold here." Now, the coldest it got the entire winter I was in Iceland was 28 degrees.
Wow.
Says in the summer, it doesn't get real warm here. It's the warmest day that I experienced in Iceland, the summer I was there, was 68 degrees. So the temperature extremes are not as extreme as most people think. And they told us that the one thing you need to be aware of and pay attention to here in Iceland is the wind. A calm day is a 25-mile-an-hour wind.
Oh, wow.
Just the wind has a tendency to pick things up and throw them. So keep your eyes and ears open and be careful. It's okay. So they sent us on to where our workstation would be and where our barracks was, checked us all in. We got to our workstation the first day. This is where they issued us the foul weather gear. They issued us combat boots so we could trudge through the snow when it snowed, and a full foul weather outfit, which included the insulated pants with the shoulder straps, and a foul weather jacket that was very heavily insulated. It had a hood on it. The hood actually folded out into a snorkel in front of your face, so that while you had that out, it was like looking through a periscope. You could only see what was right in front of you. But it kept the wind from wind burning your face in the cold. So about 3 or 4 days later, I'm finished my day's work and I'm heading from the barracks 2 blocks down the street to the mess hall for supper. I'm walking along and I hear a tin can bouncing along the ground. I says, they told us to be aware of things like this, so I stopped. No sooner than I had stopped, something flashed in front of that snorkel, and I heard a thud. And I says, what was that? I turned to look, and the wind had picked up a beer can and was blowing so hard that it actually embedded that beer can in a telephone pole.
Oh, wow.
It says, I'm not hungry. I'm going back to my poured concrete barracks.
So what were your duties there at Keflavik?
I ended up with probably the most cream puff of duties that could ever have been assigned. I and 2 other gentlemen were given the duty of checking the fuel records for the P-3 Orion sub-Hunter airplanes that flew out of Iceland. They actually patrolled the North Atlantic looking for Russian submarines. And our job was to take these little pieces of paper and make sure all the blocks were filled out. It didn't matter what was in them as long as they were filled out, and then pass them on to data processing. It took us all of 20 minutes a day to do this.
And how many hours a day were you actually on duty?
Technically, we were on duty 8 hours a day.
So what did you do for the balance of your time?
Well, it didn't take us too long to figure out that we could be doing a lot more than sitting here reading magazines and writing letters and stuff in this office. So I came up with the idea that why don't we, the 3 of us, split into 3-section duty. We all come in and muster first thing in the morning, so they know we're here. We'll take care of whatever fuel chits had come in during the night, and the 2 of us would have liberty the rest of the day. One guy would stay in case one came in later. So I took this and I went to my chief and I talked to him, and he said, that's a great idea. I mean, you guys are 8,000 miles away from home. There's a base theater, there's hobby shops, there's a gym, there's the clubs, there's all kinds of things you guys can be doing other than sitting there twiddling your thumbs. So he thought it was a great idea. So we went and we talked to our division officer, who was a Lieutenant JG, Reserve Navy, and he thought that was a great idea too. He says the only one who can approve that is the commander, who was a full lifetime career commander. And I was quite surprised when I walked into her office to find that it was Commander Mildred Carr, a female commander in charge of the comptroller division. So I came in, she said, have a seat. I sat down and told her what we wanted to do, and she thought that was a tremendous idea too, and granted us permission to do it. So, twice a week, you would catch having to stay, which meant you got in charge of filling the coffee pot when it got empty and sweeping the floors at night, along with checking any fuel chits that came through. Except for 1 week out of the 3, you only had to stay 1 day, because we only worked 5 days a week.
You really did have it soft.
It was very soft. Yeah, it was so soft to the point that I decided, instead of walking all over this base, I'm going to see if I can find a cheap used car somewhere. I found a 1947 Willys Jeep that had been repainted light purple with dark purple polka dots. It was in pretty rough shape. I had to do a lot of electrical work on it and to get it running and replace a lot of lights on it. But I think I only paid like $400 for it. And they had an auto hobby shop where I could go and use their tools to fix it up and get it running. So I did that. So I had my car to run around the base in. And when it came time for me to leave Iceland, I was able to sell it for $600. So.
Well, but with with those temperatures and stuff, you didn't have to have special precautions to start your car every morning.
No. Well, the good thing about that 1947 Willys Jeep was it not only came with a battery and electric starter, it came with a hand crank.
Oh.
So if your battery was dead, you could get out and crank it.
Oh, all right.
So
Did you have to do that very often?
I did, because I hadn't fully solved all of the electrical problems. So it taught me how to, set the choke and all that, and then get out and hand crank the thing to get it started.
The other guys in your outfit take advantage of you driving them here, there, and the other place?
Oh, yeah. And I was happy to do it.
Yeah, yeah. Well, how long were you at that base in?
I was at that base about 1 year. I believe.
Then what was your...
September of that year, that would have been 72, is when I got called in and handed orders to report to the USS Santa Barbara. It was AEO 28. And all they would tell me was that she was on a Southeast Asian cruise. Well, cruise my foot. I know where Southeast Asia is. I'm not dumb. Now, an AEO is an auxiliary explosive oiler. She was an ammunition ship and fleet oiler whose home port was actually Quonset Point, Rhode Island. But she had been temporarily assigned to Westpac and was the ammunition ship and fleet oiler for the fleet off the coast of Vietnam. So, but they did give me 30 days leave between Iceland and having to report. Let's see, I reported back to Philadelphia Naval Air Station. No, Quonset Point. I reported back to Quonset Point, Rhode Island when I came back off of leave. I sat there for a few weeks before they arranged a series of flights and bus rides for me to get from Providence, Rhode Island to Subic Bay in the Philippines. And that was quite the journey.
Well, before we talk about your journey, what did you do during that 30-day leave?
Well, during that 30 days leave, I went home, confronted the young lady that before I left for Iceland I had been courting and had fully intended to marry, and who sent me a Dear John letter while I was in Iceland. I confronted her, told her to tell her new boyfriend that I was looking for him. I knew where he worked, so that was. I waited till a couple of days before I was ready to head out to Quonset Point, and dropped into his office. He was working for a loan company, and sat down and had a nice long talk with him, and part of the conversation was, I hope you never have to go away for an extended period of time like I did, because she might find somebody else. He, knowing that I had been in the military and been thinking that I had been trained in combat, which was not the case, he was scared to death that I was going to show up. But so that
it was all relatively cordial.
yes, it was.
So you get back to Providence.
So I get to Providence, and they set me up on a couple of commercial flights. The first one was from Providence to Chicago. And the connection in Chicago was extremely tight. Fortunately, it landed on time, and I had about 20 minutes to get from one plane to the next. So here I am in uniform with my orders tucked under my arm and my carry-on bag, running through O'Hara to get to the next flight, run up to the counter to check into the flight at the last minute, and the counter people say, stand over here, we need to call some special people. Well, two businessmen came running up at the same time. Same deal, close connection. They made them stand off to the side too. About that time, 6 sky marshals show up, and they escort the 3 of us into a back room and had us stripped to the waist, dumped our bags, patted us down. Basically, they treated us like hijackers.
Was this an early version of what we have now as ICE?
Yes. Well, they probably close to that, yeah.
So you're missing your connecting flight.
No, they held the plane.
Oh.
They held the plane because we were there on time, and they knew that I was traveling on military orders. They let us get ourselves put back together. I had reserved a seat in the non-smoking, this is back when you could smoke on the planes, in the non-smoking section, but they reassigned me to the second last row in the plane, which was the back of the plane where the smoking section was. So we got on the plane, and I walked past the seat that I'd originally reserved. And I walked back and got in the seat, sat down, and immediately called the stewardess and said, this isn't the seat that I had signed up for. I want to sleep on this flight. You've put me in the middle of the smoking section. I'm a non-smoker. I don't want to be subjected to this. And they said, I'm sorry, sir, but the sky marshals have reassigned your seat. They still didn't believe I wasn't a hijacker.
Oh, jeez. In your uniform and all.
In uniform, with my orders, headed to Vietnam, and they're treating me like a skyjacker. So, but I got even.
All right.
Okay.
What's the rest of the story, as Paul Harvey say?
Oh, this. The flight from Chicago was to Sacramento. So, during this nice long flight, I decided I was going to read the paperback book I had in my bag. It was actually a philosophy book. And so I reached down to get it out of my bag, and immediately the 2 sky marshals that were sitting behind us and the 2 that were across the aisle from us jumped up to see what I was doing. They still didn't believe I wasn't a hijacker. So I told them, I'm just getting out a book to read. And I said, oh, okay, they sat back down. So I had read the book for a while and started to get a little sleepy. And I was okay, I'm going to try and sleep back here. So I turned around and said, hey guys, I'm putting the book back in my bag. You don't have to jump up. So I put the book back in my bag, and when I dropped the book in my bag, I grabbed my travel alarm clock. It was small enough I could conceal it in my hand. So I'm kind of dozing off, pretending to anyway. And I kind of lean over towards the other businessman who was stuck back there with me and says, "Hey, buddy, I've got an alarm clock in my hand. I'm going to set it to go off in about 30 minutes. So don't be alarmed when it starts ringing." And he says, "Okay." So I kind of leaned my head the other way and set the alarm clock. Just kind of quietly dropped it back in my bag. Half hour later, that thing goes off, and those sky marshals couldn't get to it fast enough. They came flying up over the back of the seat and across the aisle. And I says, "Oh, that damn alarm clock, I'm going to have to get me a new one. That thing goes off at the strangest times." So we got into Sacramento.
They didn't confiscate your alarm clock, did they?
No, it was just a simple wind-up, no wires attached to it or anything. And so, get into Sacramento. We had to take a bus from Sacramento to Travis Air Force Base, where we were going to be put on a Trans-International Airways charter, big 707 four-engine jet. And so we had to sit in the terminal for about 4 or 5 hours waiting for them to get the plane ready. Now, one of the things they do when they're loading up a charter like that is, first, it's officers with families. Second is officers. Third is petty officers and chiefs with families. Fourth is petty officers and chiefs. And fifth is all other enlisted personnel.
So this was totally a troop transport.
Totally troops. So it took us a while for everybody to get organized and get on the plane. We got on, I closed the doors and said, "We're ready to go." We taxied all of about 20 feet, and the ground crew is going crazy. They're waving their arms and wanting the plane to stop, and the plane stops, and the captain of the plane comes on and says, "The ground crew apparently thinks there's something wrong with the plane. We're going to stop for a minute and see what they've got to say." Well, we stopped. About 10 minutes later, he comes back on and he says, "I'm sorry to have to do this to you, but we're going to have to ask everybody to get off of the plane. Apparently, we've lost a wheel."
Oh, gee.
And that's what the ground crew was going frantic about. So we all got off of the plane, went back in the terminal. We had to get off to lighten the plane's load so they could jack it up and put a new wheel on. So we finally, same order, getting back on the plane, and finally took off. First stop was Honolulu. It's the middle of the night when we get to Honolulu, so there isn't a whole lot we can do other than get off the plane, go into the terminal, and get a soda out of the machine or something. So we did that. Got back on the plane. Next stop was Wake Island to refuel. Now, Wake Island is kind of a horseshoe-shaped affair with the runway on one side and all the support and barracks and stuff on the other side, and a big lagoon in the middle. When we landed in a crosswind, because there was no heading into the wind to land. We kicked up sand at the first touchdown at the end of the runway, and actually came to a full stop about 15 feet before the other end of the runway. They had to send one of their little tractors out to push us back and get us turned around to go into the terminal. Now, because we landed in a crosswind, of course there were a bunch of Navy Airedales, naval air people on board, who saw the engines flaming a bit, which is what they do in a crosswind. And so they spread the rumor that there was something wrong with the engines.
Oh, jeez.
So here we are on Wake Island. Everybody is worried that there's something wrong with the plane, that they're going to, we're now going to head on to Clark Air Base in the Philippines, on a defective plane. So we all got back on. There wasn't much else we could do. And the captain of the plane comes on again, and he says, apparently we have some jet jockeys who think they know what's going on with an airplane. He says, when you land in a crosswind, your engines are going to flame a bit. That's not a problem. That's normal. So everybody says, oh, okay.
So everybody relaxes.
So everybody relaxes. We taxi out. We get to the end of the runway, and that little tractor comes out again and pushes us backwards till the rear wheels on the main wheel struts actually drop off of the pavement, so that we are taking advantage of every inch of runway. And the captain tells us, everybody brace for it, because we're going to sit on the brakes and take the engines up to full throttle, release the brakes, which is going to throw you back in your seat, so that we've got enough speed to take off before we get to the other end of the runway.
So was that because of the weather conditions, or was it because the runway was so short?
Runway was short and the plane was overloaded. And now it's got a full load of fuel on to boot. We're going down that runway, and it seemed like forever that we were going down that runway. When we got to the other end, we actually kicked up sand off the end of the runway before we were airborne. Off we flew, finally landing at Clark Air Base. We got off the plane, claimed our baggage.
Where was that in the Philippines?
I'm not sure where Clark is in the Philippines. But it's a monstrously big, it's now the international airport in the Philippines. But from there, they put us on, the only way I could describe it was a 1940s vintage school bus that had been painted army green. No air conditioning. It's 98 degrees. It's humid as all get out. I'm still in dress blues, the Navy wool dress blues, from having left Rhode Island 30 some odd hours ago. And no chance to change clothes. Rode this bus for hours through the jungle. Ended up at Subic Bay in the Philippines, where they sent us to the transit barracks. And they told us, here's a bunk. You got your padlocks. Make sure you lock your duffel bags to your bunk, because if you don't, it'll be gone in the morning. The Filipinos would steal it and get what they could out of it. So I managed to get my uniform dry cleaned and get into summer gear. Mm-hmm. We sat in that transit barracks for about 3 or 4 days, and they finally came and told me, we're putting you on the USS LaSalle, which was a flat-bottom, shallow draft tank landing ship. And the LaSalle will take you out to just off the coast of Vietnam, where we'll transfer you to the USS Santa Barbara.
So what were the accommodations there at Subic Bay? Was that brick structure, wood structure?
It was a wood structure, just very basic barracks, bunks too high, no lockers. That's why you had to lock your duffel bag to the bed.
To the bed, yeah.
Very basic bathrooms and showers.
What kind of a trip was it on the LaSalle to get out to the Santa Barbara?
And that's why I emphasized that she was shallow draft flat bottom, because shallow draft flat bottom does not ride waves well. You feel every inch of a wave that you pass through. So I was able to, shall we say, gain my sea legs on the LaSalle.
You get seasick at all?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Big time.
How long a trip was that?
I was on the LaSalle for about 6 days. And one morning they said, okay, you guys, they're going to the Santa Barbara, and there were 2 of us. Just get your gear ready. They're sending a helicopter for you. So the LaSalle had a small flight deck on the back. So this monstrously big twin rotor Chinook lands on the back of the LaSalle. My travel mate and I toss our bags into it, climb in, they strap us in, put helmets and life jackets on us, and tie us into the communication system in the helicopter, and off we go. We were in the air a couple of hours, and we landed on the Iwo Jima, which is a helicopter carrier, to refuel the helicopter. We didn't get off or anything, we just stayed on while they put some gas in the tank. And off we go. About an hour later, the pilot of the helicopter says, I'm going to circle and corkscrew down to the Santa Barbara. She's directly below us right now. But if I corkscrew down, I'll be able to tip the helicopter so you can look out the window and see your ship from the air. So I said, okay, I can deal with this. So we're corkscrewing down, and the closer we get, the more concerned I get. And that's because it's a Monday, and I'm looking down and I'm seeing all these guys in their skivvies sunbathing on the top decks of the ship. What on earth kind of ship is this? So I says, okay. So we're going to have to find out what's going on here when we get down there. So we landed.
Had you ever been in a helicopter before?
That was my first experience with a helicopter. We landed, we got off, they assigned us a bunk, and assigned us a locker. And my first question was, what is going on here? Why is everybody sunbathing on a Monday? I said, oh, we just finished 72 hours straight underway replenishing, and the captain declared holiday routine. I said, oh, good. At least we've got a reasonable captain who knows the guys need rest. So that wasn't so bad. My next question, knowing that the ship had a billet for a chaplain, I requested to see the chaplain. And they said, oh, we got rid of him.
Okay.
Well, wait a minute. You got rid of the chaplain? He says, yeah, we don't know what denomination he was, but he had made it his business to convert every man on the ship to his religion. Which is against the rules, but
Yeah.
he did it anyway. So, okay. So what do the men do for religious services? So we don't have any. Well, the ship had a billet for a chaplain because she was in contact with all the other ships, and while they were doing underway replenishment, they could send the chaplain over to the other ship to give them some religious services, and then bring him back and transfer him around as we went.
So you stayed on the Santa Barbara, didn't you?
Yes.
How big a ship was that?
She was 564 feet long, 81 feet wide. She was only 4 years old when I came on board, so she was totally air conditioned throughout.
How many men in the crew?
360 man crew. That's including officers and enlisted. And I think there was a 12-man Marine detachment. who was on board. I'm not sure what they were there for, but they were there. And our job was to transfer ammunition and fuel and whatever else anybody needed from our ship to theirs. And we did it by high line, which is basically rigging a cable between our ship and their ship and putting a little trolley on it that would pick up a full pallet of ammunition at a time and send it over to them.
Okay, well, let's talk about where all you were. Here's a little pointer.
Okay.
We'll give Mark time to focus in on our map.
Well,
Tell me if you need it moved one way or the other.
of course, we were in and
Oh,
out of
wait till he gets,
That's good.
you okay? Okay.
It might be better if you set it on the floor,
That's fine.
if that, if you still,
We were in and out of Subic Bay in the Philippines at least every 2.5 to 3 weeks to refill us with fuel and ammunition to take out. And we were anywhere from the Gulf of Tonkin and up here all the way down, across, around the coast, all the way down to the Delta area when we were rearming anything from a destroyer to an aircraft carrier.
Was that the Mekong Delta?
I believe this is the Mekong Delta
Yeah.
here. And
Well, how did you go about refueling these other ships?
well, we would, by that high line, we would run a big hose across. And
Okay.
then hook it onto their ship, and we'd pump oil or diesel or jet fuel or whatever they needed, you know, from our ship to theirs.
And how about ammunition? How did you transport that?
Ammunition was by the pallet load, and one of these little trolleys would pick up a whole pallet load of ammunition, send it over, drop it on their deck, and then unhook it and take it where they needed it.
Okay.
Now, we also had 2 of those Chinook heavy lift helicopters
Oh,
we would-
on your ship?
on the ship,
Okay.
and we had a big flight deck on the back, and we would use them to additionally pick up pallet loads of supplies and ammunition to transfer to other ships. We were able to resupply 4 ships at a time.
Oh, wow.
We would do 2, one off each side by high line, and 2 more for further out by helicopter. So it was quite the operation when we really had things humming.
Well, did you get any place besides down at the
Well,
Delta?
We had 2, while I was on the ship, we had liberty in 2 different ports. One time we just went on around and came up over here to Satahip in Thailand, and we stayed at Satahip for a week. And while we were in Satahip, I was able to catch a bus tour into Bangkok, Thailand, which I guess is over around in here, kind of be off the side of the map. But, and spent a couple of days in Bangkok. We also,
Were you in uniform or civilian type
I
clothes?
went in civilian there. I didn't need to be identified.
Yeah.
And another side trip we took was to Kaohsiung, Taiwan, which should be up off the map, I guess over here somewhere, where we were able to trade spent brass shell casings for painting. We had saved all the shell casings from our small guns that we had for defensive purposes and traded them to some of the Taiwanese people to come on board and paint the outside of the ship.
Okay. Well, what were the occasions where you had to fire your defensive weapons?
Practice.
Okay.
That was the only time we ever fired them, was practice.
Okay.
So
Do we need our map for anything else where you were?
Well, the only other places we were was back at Subic Bay in the Philippines to get filled up again and then come back out and just fill other ships up anywhere off the coast of Vietnam.
So all the way around the coastline from place to place you would be doing your
Yes.
your supplying. Okay.
The one instance that I remember quite vividly is we were in the process of transferring ammunition from the Santa Barbara to the USS America.
What was
aircraft
that?
Carrier.
Okay.
And her flight deck was up as high as our bridge. So we were transferring ammunition from our main deck into her hangar deck. Now, one of the issues when you're doing all this supply transferring at sea in a combat zone is you do not run a straight line. You run a zigzag course, just in case they're trying to get a bead on you, and because you're not really going real fast.
Right.
So the rules are that the supplying ship calls the turns. Now with our ship, it took 45 seconds from the time you turned the wheel to the time the ship started to turn. With an aircraft carrier, it's more like 2 minutes or 2 minutes and 15 seconds from the time they turn the wheel to the time the ship starts to turn. So it's a coordination effort, a major coordination effort. So we're cruising through the ocean, zigzagging, and somehow we got out of sync, and the America ended up coming straight at us on a collision course. We called emergency breakaway, disconnected all the cables quickly and just retrieved them out of the ocean. And the America came so close to us that if I wanted to, I could have reached out and patted the side of the America.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, that was scary.
So if it took them so long to make their turn, you would have to tell them in advance if you're starting your turn.
Exactly.
So they would start, and then about a minute later, you guys would start your
Correct.
turn. What was your job on board?
My job was to maintain and man the supply storeroom. And and eventually, after 5 or 6 months of that, because I was told that I had such empathy for my fellow shipmates, they decided to make me mess deck master at arms, which I really didn't want to do, but I did.
So what were your duties with that?
It was my job to make sure the mess cooks, and that's an apt term because these are the guys that have messed up and been assigned to this duty as a punishment.
Oh, gee.
They failed to show up for duty. They were derelict in their duty. They were late coming back from shore leave. They cursed at an officer. The derelicts of the ship. These were the guys who ended up on mess duty, washing dishes, mopping floors, peeling potatoes, all that kind of stuff.
Well, how were your accommodations on the Santa Barbara as far as sleeping, first of all?
Well, I was in a compartment that was directly under the flight deck, which got kind of noisy.
The helicopter flight deck?
Yeah. And,
Were you alone, or did you have to share that?
well, I shared it with 28 other men, or 27 other men. The bunks were 3 high. The bottom 2 had their locker underneath their bunk. To get into your stuff, you had to open the lid and fold it up, and there was all your your uniforms and all your personal gear. And you close it back down, and now it's your bed. Now the first two levels were like that. The top bunk was just a bunk bed, and that person's locker was elsewhere in the room.
Where did you sleep?
I was on a bottom one, which was nice because I didn't have to climb. You could not sit up in bed. You could roll over, you could lay there and read, but you couldn't sit up.
Well, did you have any typhoons or any real adverse weather while you were there off of Vietnam?
One of the trips back to Subic Bay in the Philippines, we had the occasion to come up against a typhoon. And the captain had the option of taking a couple of extra days to go around the typhoon or go directly through it. He opted to go directly through it.
How'd your ship do on that?
The ship fared fine. I'd say 80% of the crew was down with seasickness. There were just barely enough able-bodied men left to man the ship. The waves were such that the tops of the waves were actually hitting the bridge.
Holy cow.
And when the bow of the ship would dive under one of these waves, literally, the fantail, the back of the ship, was so far out of the water that the propeller was pushing air. The propeller was completely out of the water. But
Did you have any significant listing one side or the other?
no, because we were going straight through the middle of it. And what they did do was they issued us all a 20-foot piece of rope to tie ourselves in our bunks unless we had to be on duty.
Wow.
So that when the ship did do all this bouncing and rolling, you stayed put.
Well, how long did this take place?
I guess
Days
it
or
was
hours?
about 36 hours through the worst of it. But the ship came through fine.
Yeah, but with all the tossing around, did you have any opportunity to eat? Go to the mess hall?
No. No, you didn't bother doing that.
Yeah.
So
And could you sleep?
you could try,
What-
but you were being tossed around so much that
Yeah,
you really couldn't.
yeah. So when you got through the typhoon and everything calmed down, how'd they do about feeding you? You'd have to feed you in shifts or what?
Well, then they just went back to regular hours, to regular feeding times, so, but they made sure that the first couple of meals were nice big ones.
With food good?
The food, I have to say, was excellent on the ship. The cooks managed to make everything, even the dehydrated eggs, they made them taste good. But they had a few tricks up their sleeve. Like when we would have mashed potatoes, we knew that 90% of the mashed potatoes were instant. But what they would do is they'd take about 20 or 30 pounds of real potatoes and cut them up fine and toss them in with the instant mashed potatoes to make them lumpy, to make you think they were real potatoes. They had one delicacy that they affectionately called tube steaks.
Those hot dogs?
Hot dogs. However, at least every Sunday, we had either steak or lobster.
Wow.
And they would grill the steaks on oil drums cut in half out on the flight deck.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and we did eat good.
How about alcohol? Do you have any alcohol on board?
Not allowed. Not allowed on a Navy ship. Of course, the officers were kind of exempt from that.
So what'd you do in your off time on board?
Well, off time was spent reading, watching movies. We had movies on the mess deck every night. And what I decided to do, which kind of ostracized me from the crew a bit, was that we had no chaplain. So one time when we were in Subic Bay, I saw the captain up on the bridge watching them load the ship. I walked up and introduced myself, and I said, "Captain, are we going to get a new chaplain?" And he says, "No, they don't have one they can assign us right now." He says, "Well, what can the men do for religious services if they so desire?" And he says, "Well, if we get a volunteer, we could probably assign them to be a lay leader." I says, "Well, Captain, my bachelor's degree included 18 hours of college level theology and 15 hours of college level philosophy. I think I could handle being chaplain on board the ship." So I became the Catholic lay leader on that ship, and every Sunday we were at sea, I would hold a non-denominational service in the crew's library. It was available, which was my intention. My biggest crowd was 7. My smallest was 2. And one time, 2 young officers came, and I did my little 20-minute service, and afterwards they cornered me and says, "You're an enlisted man. What makes you think you can do this?" Says, "With all due respect, sirs, no officer volunteered. I have the credentials of college level theology and philosophy. I can handle this." And they just said, and walked out.
Did they come back?
They never came back, no. When we were in port, it was up to every man to go find his own religious services at whatever his faith demanded of him.
What was your longest period of time that you were at sea without getting in port?
Probably about a month. We weren't out that long. We weren't on, and because we were a supply ship and constantly running back to port to get filled up, it wasn't like we were out on a long deployment.
Did you ever get close to shore to what they call the blue water?
We were, most of the time we were in blue water. And it was the brown water Navy that was really close. Those were the river guys. Those were the ones who got in real close to shoot the guns. So we were pretty much blue water Navy, which means we stayed a far piece away. At night sometimes we could see the distant flashes, like distant lightning in the sky from the bombs that were being dropped. But other than that, we didn't get real close.
Never had any exposure to Agent Orange or any of the other defoliation?
One of the things that we carried on that ship were the 55-gallon drums of Agent Orange, of the dioxin. And they would routinely leak. And they would send us in with mops and buckets to clean it up.
Any masks or any?
Nothing.
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 Did you get any repercussions from being around Agent Orange and smelling that stuff?
Absolutely. I lost my right kidney to cancer due to Agent Orange. And
when was that diagnosed?
In 1992. It's when I had a radical nephrectomy to remove the right kidney. So I've been living on one kidney ever since. And it's just been 3 years now that the VA has determined kidney cancer to be presumptive. And I did file a claim and am now being compensated for the loss of the kidney due to Agent Orange.
What's your disability percentage?
At the moment, it's 40%. I do have another claim that I'm just starting, which is for hypertension, which caused a silent heart attack, which has caused a few other issues. And at this point, it's my doctor filling out the appropriate paperwork to submit to the VA to see if we can get that percentage raised.
Well, it always amazed me that the government could think that the Agent Orange and the other defoliation products could take down all the camouflage for the enemy, and it wouldn't have any effect on our troops.
Okay,
Just,
I'm not sure how long ago this fell off.
Leave the South Pacific.
Okay, we left the area around the Philippines in March of '73.
Where did you go?
We came back across the Pacific. We stopped overnight in Pearl Harbor, and we tied up at the supply pier after we took our 564-foot long ship of a tour down Battleship Row.
Okay.
And which was very interesting because some of the rusted hulks of the ships that were bombed out then were still sitting there. And so we tied up at the supply pier, and the supply between us and the Arizona, there was nothing but water. We were right there, right next to the Arizona. We were only there overnight, so I was able to take some liberty and go ashore and spend the evening in Honolulu.
Okay.
Which was great. I could feel solid land under my feet.
After a year.
After we pulled out the next morning, fully supplied with, food and fuel and such. And we were actually bringing some ammunition back to the States that couldn't be used anymore.
Why was that?
Well, because the ships that used it had left.
Okay.
So there wasn't anybody to take it, so we're bringing it back.
All right.
And we came back through the Panama Canal and then up the East Coast into Quonset Point, Rhode Island. And
Where you started out.
Where we started out. That was home port. When we tied up at the carrier pier at the Naval Air Station in Quonset Point, there was an aircraft carrier across the pier from us. It's the USS Intrepid. And she's now a museum down in New York.
Okay.
And I didn't know it at the time, but a gentleman who became my good friend later on in life was a machinist mate on the Intrepid. He is since deceased, just about a year ago, but he and I swapped many a sea story between the time we met about 10 years ago and last year.
Oh, I'll bet. I'll bet. Well, how long were you at Quonset Point?
I was at Quonset Point until July 1st of '73, which was when I was separated from active duty and sent home.
How did you get home?
I drove.
Did you tell anybody you were coming home?
Mom and Dad knew I was coming home. But other than that, we were told to keep quiet that we would be coming into town. Because back in the early 70s, it was not advisable to let anyone know you had been to Vietnam.
Right, right.
It was very much that they told us, in fact, that if we could at all possible, come into home under cover of darkness so that nobody would know you were there yet.
Uh-huh. What kind of a car did you have?
I had bought a 1966 Ford Fairlane coupe
Where?
in Rhode Island.
Okay.
So it had Rhode Island plates on it.
Had you been
And
saving all your money that you earned while you were in service, or had you sent some of that home, or what'd you do with it?
well, I had been keeping it and just not taking it as pay and letting it build up till we got back to Quonset Point, and then I took it all out and I put it in the Navy Federal Credit Union at Quonset Point, Rhode Island, because it got more interest there than sitting in my payroll account on the ship.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I used some of that to purchase that car.
How long did it take you to get home? Did you come right straight home, or did you stop?
Well, the issue was that my brother was visiting one of his priest friends in Bristol, Connecticut. So I drove from Quonset Point, Rhode Island to Bristol, Connecticut to pick up my brother. And then we took 2 days to drive from there back home to northern Kentucky.
Okay. So how did your mom and dad greet you?
Very warmly. They were very happy that I was back home.
I'll bet. I'll bet.
And I come to find out later that our time in Vietnam was we were there during the last major offensives to try and end that thing. And that's why they needed the extra ammunition ship over there to supply everybody. So as some of my friends who were there early in the war saying, yeah, we got everything rolling, and I said, well, I shut it all down for you.
So while you were while you were in service, did you communicate with your mom and dad by mail or phone?
I was able to call home twice. One time from Keflavik, Iceland, at Christmas Eve, and it was via the shortwave radio connection. You know, hi Mom, this is Mike, over. And they'd say, hi, this is Mom, over. You know, back and forth.
Yeah.
But, you know, for about 10 minutes. That was about all I had.
And where was the second?
The second was in Subic Bay in the Philippines, and for me, it was Christmas Day. For Mom and Dad, it was still Christmas Eve, and they'd had no clue I was going to be calling.
Okay.
I had gone to the communications office and said, you know, hey, if somebody doesn't show up, can I have their time? And they said, yeah, sure, you know, if you don't mind waiting. Well, I waited all of 10 minutes, and they said, the guy who's got the next 10 minutes didn't show up, you got it.
Good.
So I was able to basically do the same shortwave radio thing for me Christmas Day, them Christmas Eve.
Mm-hmm.
Other than that, it was letters.
Did you keep any of those, or did Mom keep any?
I don't know. I know I don't have any, but I don't know if Mom and Dad kept any or not. Now, both of them are now deceased, so if there were any kept, they're probably long gone.
Uh-huh. All right, well, you get home, and then what do you do about seeking employment and any female relationships? And
Well, while I was in Quonset Point, Rhode Island, I met a young lady in a W.T. Grant's department store because I wanted to get a pair of civilian shoes so it didn't look so obvious when I went out in public. And she was working the shoe counter. I ended up asking her out for a cup of coffee that night, and we started dating. She was still a senior in high school.
how old were you?
And at this point, I'm a college graduate with 2 years of military behind me and a year of reserve service behind me.
So you're about 25.
Probably at least. Well, more than that. Because I graduated college when I was 22. Yeah, about 25, 26. No business dating a young lady that young. Anyway, it got serious, and a year later in '74, we got married.
And her name was Deborah?
Deborah Ann Comiskey.
C-U or C-O?
Cummiskey.
Okay,
And we had 3 daughters. Yeah, Anne Elizabeth, Lynn Marie, and Sarah Margaret.
okay. And Anne Elizabeth's last name is Robertson?
Her last name is now Robertson. She is a nurse trainer now. She trains people to become nurses
Where?
in Rhode Island.
She's 43?
She's just should be 46 now.
You got down here
Shoot.
43 on your
Okay.
bio.
Let's see, she was born in 1980, so then
Yeah.
she'll be 46 next month.
All right, and Lynn Marie, how do you
Lynn-
say her last name?
Lynn Marie Belanger.
Belanger, okay.
She just turned 42. Yeah. And then Sarah Margaret, who just turned 39. Anne has 2 sons, both of whom are autistic.
Oh,
Her husband is a captain in the police department in Cranston, Rhode Island.
okay. How about Lynn Marie? Where does she live?
Lynn lives in Mystic, Connecticut,
That's a nice town.
and her husband, David Belanger, works for General Dynamics, the electric boat division, building nuclear submarines, which is where I worked for 14 years.
Okay, we'll get into that shortly. So, Lynn Marie have children?
Lynn Marie has 2 children, a little boy who just turned 12, and a little girl who just turned 8, turned 8. Jackson and Lacey.
And Sarah Margaret's still a Vogelpohl?
Sarah Margaret is still Vogelpohl. She never has married.
Where she live?
She lives in Warwick, Rhode Island, and she's a hospital administrator at South County Hospital in Wakefield, Rhode Island.
Okay. So they all like New England.
Well,
so
that's
do
where
I.
they were born,
So do I.
and I lived in Rhode Island for 25 years until Deborah decided she didn't want to be married anymore.
Well, let's talk about Rhode Island. Okay, took a little break there, and we're starting to talk about what you did work-wise, and where you talked about your marriage and the kids, but how about work? What was your first job?
First job after I got back out of the service was as the safety coordinator for AAA in Cincinnati. I did a little bit of everything there. I marked maps, I ran roads. I actually wrote a wrecker to go out and run road service in the winter. Didn't like that a whole lot, but and ran some of their safety programs, which is basically driver safety and school bus safety and crossing guard safety for them. They had promised me a significant raise when I got married, which is what I did in May of '74. And so when I came back from the honeymoon and asked them about it, they said, "Oh, we can't do that right now." So I thought, okay, well, I got to find something more than what you've been paying me to sustain my life now as a married man. So I actually went to work for Western Southern Life Insurance to be trained to be a life insurance agent. And I found out very quickly that I couldn't tell the stories that needed to be told to convince people to buy life insurance. basically because I didn't feel they were as truthful as they should have been.
Okay.
So at that point, the new young wife and I decided that I needed to be looking for something else. Well, she had gotten a letter from her uncle, who at that point was working for General Dynamics Electric Boat Division, and he told her in that letter that they were looking for more people, and that probably if I came in and filled out an application, they would hire me. So based on that and that alone, we packed everything we owned in a U-Haul, had her father and sister come down and help us drive our 2 cars in the U-Haul back to Rhode Island. Actually lived out of her parents' TV room for 3 or 4 months. And I went into General Dynamics, filled out the application, must have put down the right thing, because by the time I got back to her parents' house, there was a phone call that said they wanted to interview me.
Now, what city was that located in?
Okay, that's in Groton, Connecticut.
Okay.
So I went back down the next day. They interviewed me and offered me a job that was actually paying double what I had been paid by the life insurance company.
You thought you had died and gone to heaven.
Yeah. So I went to work for them. Lasted all of 3 years before they laid me off. One of the things with a government contractor like that is when the contracts are slim, they lay a lot of people off. When the contracts are fat, they hire a lot of them back. So I got laid off. I started with them in October of '74. Got laid off in October of '77. For a short while, I worked for Monet Jewelers in Providence, Rhode Island, while I was working on my master's degree, which, by the way, the GI Bill paid for.
Where did you take that?
And that was at the University of New Haven. Their main campus is West Haven, Connecticut, but they ran a branch campus in Groton, Connecticut, right next door to Electric Boat. So I was able to take classes right there. When I graduated with my master's degree, I went into my boss at Monet Jewelers and didn't say, I've got a master's degree, now pay me more. I went in and said, now that I have this degree, what more can I do for Monet Jewelers? And his comment was, well, here at Monet, education doesn't mean a thing. As I see. So this isn't good. So I guess a couple of weekends later, Debbie and I were visiting her Uncle Bob, who still worked at General Dynamics, and I made that, told him what had happened with that, and he says, well, we're looking for people who've got the experience you've got. We need them desperately because we're under a major government audit and we have to show them we're correcting things. They need you back. So I took a sick day and went back down to General Dynamics, went through the application process, and 2 days later I got a phone call that says, can you come back to work for us? We'll pay you. And it was more than double what Monet was paying me. So I said, okay, we can do this.
So you're back in heaven again.
So I'm back into General Dynamics. They bridged my service, which meant technically that I now had 3 years plus experience with them. And I ended up working there for another 11 years before they laid me off again. But I thoroughly enjoyed the work there. I was good at it. I was writing procedures on how to do anything. Anything from how to, put the nuts and bolts on a submarine to major purchasing procedures and contract changes and whatever procedure needed to be written to show that we were doing things the right way, that was what I did. After General Dynamics, I ended up working for a small company called Hope Valley Industries, which makes car floor mats. And they make the original equipment floor mats for GM, Ford, Chrysler, Jaguar, Volkswagen, Mercedes, all the high-end original equipment floor mats.
Mm-hmm. How long did you work there?
That lasted about a year and a half. Then they ran into financial difficulties to the point where if you weren't family, they couldn't give you the company credit card to go buy groceries. They had to lay you off. So from there, I worked for a company called Amtrol for, I guess, about a year and a half, 2 years.
AMTROL?
Mm-hmm. And they're in West Warwick, Rhode Island.
What'd you do there?
There, I was just a production worker on the floor. They make pressurized tanks for home heating systems, for water systems. Nothing I really wanted to be doing, but it was kind of a fill-in job. And did Deborah work outside the home at all after you started having children? She became a pharmacy tech, working at the local pharmacy counting pills. And then in the meantime, she used part of my GI Bill to go to college and get a degree in computer programming.
Okay.
And she had problems holding a job because she could never be in everybody was always doing something different from what she wanted done.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So she had an issue with that. But so all of that eventually caused too much friction between us that she decided that I didn't need to be around anymore. What we did come to find out was that she had a mental illness that caused her to not be able to maintain relationships.
Okay.
And that was why she didn't want me around anymore. Okay. She ended up divorcing me. She has since passed away. I did get my annulment through the Catholic Church and remarried to my current wife, Joan Donna Vogelpohl. And
Joan Donna, what was her maiden name?
Her maiden name was Capel. She was also divorced because her first marriage name was Poston. So now she carries my last name.
Okay.
And we've been married for 22 and a half years now.
Good. You got married, in June 7 of 03?
Mm-hmm. And, of course, that makes for a very tenuous, sometimes blended family. But,
and I see here that she's a registered nurse?
She is.
Or was, I don't know.
She is still.
Okay.
She maintains her nursing license, and she maintains her nursing insurance. But she's been retired for a good 14, 15 years now.
Okay.
She was an intensive care cardiac nurse, which means that I got to watch it when I'm eating or doing exercises or stuff.
Yeah. Well, where'd you go after Amtrol?
Amtrol, let's see. After Amtrol, it was I think Hope Valley Industries was actually after Amtrol. Yeah. For a short while, I was an insurance agent for Knights of Columbus Insurance, but again, I found I couldn't tell the stories that needed to be told to sell insurance. But during that period of time is when she decided to get rid of me. And one of the stories that I heard, because I was just living out of an efficiency apartment in Rhode Island, was that if any of her family ever caught me out alone, they were going to tar and feather me.
Oh, gee.
So I said, I don't need this. So in 1999, I moved back to Kentucky.
What'd you do here?
Well, the first job I had when I got back here was working for the American Cancer Society and the Midwest Division. And I was actually a cancer control project manager and a metro manager for the American Cancer Society. I had 7 counties in northern Kentucky under me as a cancer control project manager. And I was also the northern Kentucky, the Kenton, Boone, Campbell County area metro manager, representing the American Cancer Society in all those counties.
Good.
I was wildly successful at that. And that some of the cancer control projects that I ran, I would have the goal of getting, and as an example, one of them was a program designed to get women to go get a mammogram. Mm-hmm. And the goal was to go into some of these rural counties and get them to get 7 or 8 women to go get a mammogram. Well, I would go into those counties and get 35 to 40 women to go get mammograms. And I did pretty much the same in all of my other counties, which I think scared my boss that I was doing so well that I was a threat to her.
Oh.
And because I did things the way a man would do them and not the way a woman would do them, she decided that I was not a good fit for the American Cancer Society.
So how long did you do that?
For about 2.5 years I was in that job. And I say it just so far exceeded expectations that they thought I was a threat.
What came next after American Cancer?
After that, there were a couple of menial, just to fill the void until I found something decent, jobs. I worked in nutrition services at St. Elizabeth Hospital, basically washing dishes. And I worked for a company called Industrial Sorting Services, and their job was to go in and sort parts, to sort defective from good parts in some of the major factories in the greater Cincinnati area.
Well, what was your next significant job?
Next significant job and last job was Joan saw an ad in the paper for a quality control manager for a company called Bendelutz Corporation, which is actually out of Florence, Kentucky.
Spell that.
BENDA-LUTZ.
All right.
They are the American subsidiary of Bendelutz International, which at that time operated out of Treismauer, Austria. And their claim to fame is processing powder coatings to make them the color that the customer wants and put a metallic sparkle in them. Now, the metallic sparkle is powdered aluminum.
Okay.
Powdered aluminum is a very dangerous product.
Breathing-wise or explosive-wise?
Explosive-wise, a dust cloud of powdered aluminum is more volatile than a vapor cloud of gasoline. The slightest static spark will set it off. That's why nobody wants to mess with it. But Ben DeLutz had perfected the process of combining the aluminum into powder coating to give it a sparkle.
Mm-hmm.
And along with that, they would tint it to the color that the customer wanted. So the customer would supply us with the powder coating. We would make it the color they want, put the metallic sparkle they wanted in it, put it back in their box and send it back to them, and charge them an exorbitant amount of money to do it.
When did you start with Ben DeLutz?
I started with them in July of '03.
When did you retire from there?
I retired from there in April of '14.
Been retired ever since?
Been retired ever since.
Where did you physically work with Ben DeLutz?
Okay, it was out off of Tobin Road, south of Florence, almost in Independence.
Was that a processing facility?
Yes, that was a processing facility in main North American offices.
Did you have any accidents there?
Not while I was there, and I don't think they have since.
Okay.
They're very, very much into safety procedures and safety precautions. And
so what do you do in your spare time now that you're retired?
well, now that I'm retired, I am the chaplain, again, for Vietnam Veterans of America, Chapter 71, out of Aurora, Indiana. I'm in the Knights of Columbus. I'm in the council that operates out of St. Teresa's Church in Bright, Indiana. We are very big, more than once a week, churchgoers. We take a lot of classes with church.
Do any traveling?
We have been to a number of places. We've been to Orlando, Florida. We've been to Williamsburg, Virginia. Quite regularly until lately, we have been going out to Cody, Wyoming, which is where one of Joan's daughters lives.
We haven't talked about her kids. How many children does she have?
She had 2 daughters and 1 adopted son.
Their names?
Okay, the oldest is Mary Elizabeth, and it is now Mary Elizabeth Montgomery. She and her husband Jim live in Cody.
Okay.
They had 3 children. The oldest is James Montgomery III, or Trey. He lives with them at the present time. I think he's about 28. He's still single. They have a daughter, Madeline Helena, who just this past June got married, and it's now Madeline Helena Svensson. She Swenson. And she lives in Billings, Montana with her new husband. No children yet. And Matthew Montgomery, whose wife's name is Lindsay, and they live in Cody, Wyoming. Trey is a licensed pilot and certified flight instructor. He flies charter flights.
Oh.
Madeline's husband, Eric, is a licensed pilot who flies the Medevac jet out of Billings, Montana to anywhere in the country. And Madeline is a chemist. And Matthew Montgomery is an airplane mechanic in Cody, and his wife is a mortgage originator.
Okay.
Joan's other daughter, Amy, is working on her PhD in horticulture while she's teaching at Colorado State University, and just north of Denver, Colorado. Her son, whom she adopted, was the youngest of her 3 children. Unfortunately, he was killed in an automobile accident in 1992.
Oh.
I think 2 days before his 16th birthday.
Oh, wow.
Now, Joan was one of the nurses on duty in the emergency room the night of the accident.
Oh.
And they brought the 2 kids in. There were 3 kids in the car. 2 of them died, 1 didn't. She was working on the one that didn't, and
Mike, we've been here a couple hours, and it's been very interesting. Mark, do you have any questions?
I don't. We covered a lot of ground on this one, and
Is there anything that we haven't talked about, Mike, that you thought might be of some interest to anybody looking at this and listening to this?
well, other
down the
than
road?
the past few years have been major health challenges for me. About 4 years ago, I had a silent heart attack that I didn't even know I had. And I hit the ground and pinched some nerves in my back that don't let my right leg operate quite correctly. And it was very interesting the way I found out I had a heart attack. I had gone into the doctor to have a colonoscopy.
Okay.
And that went fine. And my cardiac nurse wife is watching my monitor, and she didn't like the way that the heartbeat line was showing up. So the anesthesiologist came in to check on me afterwards, and she says, "Doc, what do you think of this?" And the doctor says, "Oh, that's normal. He's just coming out from under the anesthesia." Well, given her experience, she knew better. So the colonoscopy doctor, who happens to be a good friend of the family, comes in, and she says, "Hey, Greg, what do you think of this?" And he says, "That doesn't look quite normal. Let's get an EKG." So we got an EKG, and he comes back in with the results, and he says, "I was right. It doesn't look quite normal. I think you ought to go see your family doctor." So we go in to see the family doctor. He says, "Let's put you on a Holter monitor for 48 hours, and let's get an echocardiogram." So we did that, turned in the monitor, and he calls me within a day, and he says, "It doesn't look quite normal." We've heard this before. It says, "I think you ought to go see a cardiologist." So I go into the cardiologist, and he looks at all the tests we've done so far, and he says, "Let's do a stress test, a pharmaceutical stress test." So we did that, and the results come back, and my wife reads them before the doctor calls, and she tells me what the doctor's going to say, because she knows these things. And the doctor calls and says, "I need to see you in my office first thing tomorrow morning." That's okay. So we go in, and he says, "Here's what it showed. It showed that you've got some blockages in your heart, that we need to do an angiogram to find out what's going on in there. And while we're in there, if we find anything we can fix right away, we'll fix it. If it seems to be too extensive, we'll wheel you down the hall to open heart surgery and take care of things." So we go in for the angiogram, and they don't knock you out completely for an angiogram. You can hear everything that's going on, but you can't talk, you can't move, you can't see anything. And it's very disconcerting because you're hearing all these different commands the doctor's barking out, and I could sense in his voice that he was getting very disturbed, that something wasn't going right. And towards the end of it, he finally settles down and is more calm and seems to be content with things. And then he tells the nurse, give him 10 of fentanyl. He says, I don't want that stuff. But I can't tell him, I don't want that stuff. Yeah, he gave me 10 micrograms of fentanyl. So we get back in the recovery room, and the doctor comes in, and he says, here's what we found. So now, bear in mind, this is now 3 years ago. He says, sometime in the last year and a half, you had a heart attack. I did? I had no clue. It says, and one of the major arteries in your heart is 100% blocked, but you've built laterals around it. I built my own bypass. It says, and we found another one that was 90% blocked, but after 14 tries, which is what he was getting exasperated about, we managed to get a stent in there. So that one's all taken care of. It says, and then we found a third one that was 40 to 60% blocked, but we're going to treat that one with medication.
Yeah.
He says, okay, so I had a silent heart attack. I'm still here. I still don't know what a heart attack feels like because I didn't remember feeling anything.
Yeah.
And then he says, oh, and by the way, if we hadn't done all of this today and got you on this medicine regimen here in September, by December you'd be dead. I said, thank you.
Thank goodness you had the colonoscopy.
Yeah. So.
Well, look, I don't have any more questions, and Mark doesn't have any, so let me thank you for doing this interview, and thank you for your service.
Thank you, sir.